couples that are doing well, generally speaking, 5 out of 6 of their interactions are positive. In other words, there's a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions. And if you start to keep track of what's going on at home, you may discover that even if you're not talking about the negative stuff, you're not mentioning the positive things. And we all have little moments of our partner did something that was helpful or nice for us. Everyday stuff like they parked your car for you because you came home late and didn't have time to put it in the driveway, or they went and got the groceries, even if they forgot the tomatoes. And too often, I've had couples tell me when I say you need to mention these things, I've had them say, well, that's just table stakes. And I have to take a deep breath there, because when it comes to close relationships and trying to get them in the right place, there's no such thing as table stakes. It's not like somebody owes you a certain number of favors or nice things just because they live with you. I mean, what a privilege that you actually get to share your life with somebody, but they don't owe you that. That's special.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Dr. KATHRYN Ford, MD. She is a renowned couples therapist and psychiatrist. And we're going to be talking about her new book, The Aperture Effect, a radically simple approach to finding joy and connection in your relationship. KATHRYN and I are going to be talking about what the Aperture Effect is, how we can use it to improve our relationships. We also talk about having tough conversations and how to make those a little bit easier, and some techniques we can use and exercises to make our relationships more communicative. KATHRYN has a lot of great practical and simple tools for helping anyone to navigate relationships and to feel joy. So let's jump into it. This is KATHRYN Ford. KATHRYN, it's so great to meet you. I'm very happy you're on the show. We're going to talk about couples and joy and connection and probably challenges, because we all have them. And I know you've written a book. Is it out yet?
It is out. Actually, 2 days ago was the official publication date, and I've been getting pictures from my friends that their copy has arrived. So it's very exciting.
Oh, great. Okay. And it's called The Aperture Effect. And we're going to talk about what that is to start with. And we'll come back to we'll mention the book again at the end, of course, because we want people to buy this thing. You know a lot about this stuff. You've been doing it your whole life.
Yes, that's
What
true.
is the Aperture Effect?
The Aperture Effect refers to the fact that you can be much more effective at connecting if you pay attention to openness in the moment as a sub-skill of mindfulness. That's the way you can craft your conversations, you can guide them. Conversations, especially between couples, but with anybody that you really care about, are wonderful, and they can also be kind of difficult. And so the Aperture Effect refers to the fact that before everything else comes aperture, comes the attention to openness. And it turns out that neurologically, we're very well wired to sense openness in ourselves and other people. And most of the time we don't pay enough attention to it, and we try to drive the car some other way. But this is really the eyes on the road for your relationship is aperture.
You know, that's a beautiful thought. And a very wise thought. In my experience, very difficult to stay open. And I think most people, well, I can't speak for most people. I'll speak for myself. I'm often guarded, and in two ways. One, that I'm going to be told something, or something's going to be said that I would rather not hear or don't feel like I can handle. And the other is that the other person will be offended by something I say and shut down. And so there is this, to me, the biggest problem in life in any area is some kind of a fear. And so, I'm not sure how many couples could do that without maybe an objective third party helping them to learn it.
Right. So you're bringing up something that's really important that I want to emphasize about aperture and the aperture effect and aperture awareness. You started out by saying, I'm not sure I can do that. It's really hard to stay open. The aperture awareness and the aperture effect is not about staying open. None of us can stay open all the time. In fact, it's kind of natural that we're not. Sometimes we want to be a little bit more guarded, but we don't want to be guarded when love and beauty and all the wonderful things of life are available. What aperture effect means is that your openness and mine during a conversation is going to vary every single micro moment. It's not something that's static. In other words, I'm not talking about, are you, Bob, an open person? Or do I have openness with my partner? I'm talking about something that's changing in the moment, as everything in life does all the time. And so what I'm talking about is not staying open. I'm talking about the ability to know your state of openness, because it's sort of like driving a car. If you're driving a car and you've got your eyes on the road, which is where they should be if you're driving a car, and the road ahead is wide open, clear, straight away, sunshiny, you can drive pretty fast and have a good time and get there pretty quickly. That's wide open aperture. But if the road starts to be slick or curvy, or there's suddenly a boulder in the middle, you want to have your eyes on that, and you want to make an adjustment so that the driving doesn't become hazardous and you don't go off the road. Same thing with aperture awareness. Keeping an eye on where openness is allows you to adjust. And it turns out with conversation, as with driving, usually the adjustment you want to make if apertures start to close, if you or your partner start to close down, is you want to slow things down. And it's very similar to driving. So it's not about open all the time. It's about accurately responding to the conditions that are happening, especially your openness.
The hard part to me would be, and I think it is the hardest part, is that when two people aren't on the same page in that moment, there's a,
Mm-hmm.
there's a, it's almost like we're going to sit down and have a talk now. So we need to, sort of clear the decks of lots of things and just have the talk about the thing that we're going to talk about, not take things too personally, and want the same result, which is some sort of a common agreement, maybe, or the best way to handle a situation. And usually conversations don't start that way. Usually they just start with, why didn't you do this? Or, or this thing you did is really pissing me off. Because there's a comfortability in certainly in medium to long-term relationships that can be, it's like, there's a shorthand to the commonness of, the dailies with another person. So this is what I find for myself. Sometimes I'll just say stuff, and vice versa, and the other person will go, "What the fuck?" To put it bluntly. I guess you're talking about mindfulness, but in the moment, that is really,
Right.
not.
Right.
I don't walk around, spend my days, making an effort to be mindful, and I'm probably more mindful than most.
What you're talking about, I sometimes talk about as, it's important to know when you need to talk, and it's important to know when not to talk. And so, yeah, if you're living with somebody, there are lots of moments, like a lot of them every single day, where you trip on something that the other person did or said that didn't feel so good. If you mention it, some people make the mistake of thinking that open communication means you say how you feel exactly in the moment you feel it. Well, if you do that, you kind of poison the well. You kind of make the atmosphere that the two of you inhabit overly negative and kind of scary. Like you never know when the next little jab or the next comment is coming. You don't really want to do that. The most important thing you can do to have good talks about the things that are wrong or about the hard stuff is to mostly have positive commentary most of the time. And if there's something negative or something that's going to be difficult or controversial, you kind of schedule a talk for that and say, you know, that thing that happened in the kitchen, I really need a time to talk to you about that. When would it be a good time? That's the way to handle it. And what you find is if you stop yourself from bringing up all those little negative comments in the moment, what you find is you get a chance to sort through them. And about some very high percentage of them kind of drop away as it was a thing of the moment, or they were tired, or I was tired, no big deal. And then there's a few that don't go away, that they kind of stay with you. They're sort of a pattern. And those are the ones that you decide, okay, we're going to have a talk about this. So that's what I would say is it's important to know when not to talk as well as when to talk.
Yes, I keep my mouth shut a lot.
Right, exactly.
But here's another thing that I find is a big challenge. You have two people, they come from different families, and they meet and they fall in love and they have a relationship, and they have different perceptions. One can be the simple one of gender difference, which is pretty big. And the other one is life experience and a point of view that, let's say I say something and the other person takes it in a way that I didn't intend it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just use my own example. Then I explain what I actually meant. It's perceived as backpedaling and dishonest, even though it isn't. And then it creates a conflict of, I know what you meant. I know you. That's what you actually meant. No, it isn't what I meant. And then it's, accusations and, uncomfortability, and I'll talk to you later, which is a good thing, by the way,
Right.
to separate when the bomb goes off,
Yes.
to varying degrees of explosivity. Is that a
Yes,
real word,
exactly.
explosivity? It sounds like it might be.
I think we need that word if it's not. So yes.
So these are like the kind of, when I step away from it and I look at it later, it's kind of funny, but
Right.
in the moment, it's very uncomfortable. I'm going to give you a little story from yesterday. So not a big deal. That's why I'm going to tell this. We were having a conflict about something. And then my wife is telling me about some model who married this guy. And she got remarried. Her husband died. She married this guy. And they're very happy together. I guess she follows this person. And he bought her a castle. They're moving into a castle in Europe. I go, oh. And then she says, you would never do that. And I go, and I just kind of was like, I didn't roll my eyes so she could see it, but inside I rolled my eyes. And then she said something else. I said, I don't want to live in a castle in Europe. I've never brought that up. You've never brought it up. Oh, yeah, I know, but you wouldn't do it. I go, I don't even know. So it wasn't about that. It wasn't about the statement that she made. It was about her feeling like not taken care of. And that's what was going on before that.
Right.
We were talking about something.
Right.
But it was such a funny, today it's a funny thing. In the moment, I'm like, there's nothing I can say right now that's not going to look like a backpedal.
Right. So what did you do?
I changed the subject.
That was probably a good punt at the moment. Yeah.
And then I left to go do something, in another room.
Right.
But I thought it was very sort of, I'm sure that's very typical. My male friends tell me the things their wives say to them, and it's never about the thing. It's always about something else.
Right. Well, first of all, I'm really happy to hear that you've learned the part about going into another room. A lot of people underestimate how important that is. There's a certain point of getting activated in a negative way by your partner where you really can't function very well anymore. You're not thinking straight. You're not talking very well. You're not understanding very well. You're not listening very well. And when one or both of you gets to that point, which sometimes in the psychology we call that flooding, when one or
Yeah.
both of you gets flooded, it's very good idea to separate because what's going to happen next is not pretty and it's not going to help your relationship. In fact, you're going to have to fix all of that later. There was something else you said at the end of that that I wanted to think about together. And now I'm so struck by that comment that I forgot what it was. Oh, I know. These things like the person brings up something and it's not about that. There's a little trick you can do with that when you feel enough goodwill and enough like you've got your feet on the ground and you're not flooded to do it, which is sometimes I teach people to think of those things as a doorbell comment. The comment itself isn't great. It's kind of an attempt to open a conversation. It's sort of like the person is ringing the doorbell, and what that says is there's something in this zone I'd like to talk to you about, but it's just a doorbell. And if you treat it that way, as opposed to going literal about it, like why are we talking about castles? But it sounds like you already had enough savvy to know this is about castles. And so you treat it as a doorbell comment, which means you treat it as an awkward or not so successful request for the door to open. And then you decide, okay, I'm opening the door right now to that conversation, or I'm going to tell the person, sorry, I'm busy, come back later.
Mhm.
But you don't get hooked into the idea of going down the rabbit's hole of what it seems to be about, but really isn't.
That's a lot of life experience in a
Yes, it
marriage or
is.
in a relationship to be able
Right,
to do that because it
right.
used, when it's things are new, people want to fight and they want to win. Of course, there's
Mhm.
nothing to win. That's the a nice realization.
Right.
I mean, if peace is winning, then that's not the way to get there. And also, this is true of any sort of relationship or romantic or not. It's saying nothing and having no expression on your face becomes a mirror for the other person to look at themselves. It's a really powerful thing. That's where silence actually works really well. And then the other piece of it, which a lot of people talk about, is not taking things personally, even when they're personal.
I think what we mean when we say don't take it personally, because it is kind of a funny, ambiguous term. I think part of what we mean is don't don't engage in a way that's overly activated. This goes back to the aperture thing and openness. There's a certain amount of openness that you need to have to engage with the other person well enough. You don't have to be wide open, but you have to be open enough that you can listen well, that you can be patient, that you can be flexible, that you can be curious. And if you're not enough of those things, the conversation is going to go south pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so, you mentioned, well, yeah, this takes a lot of life experience. Yes, it does. And yet some of the people that are probably listening to us are younger than we are and don't have as much life experience. So what about if you're just starting out, you're just learning about relationships? And what I would say is mindfulness, aperture awareness, these are not all or nothing kinds of things. You said something about it's hard to be mindful all the time. Yes, it is. But a little bit of mindfulness is actually helpful. You don't have to be, the guru sitting on the cushion to be mindful.
Yeah.
You can start to have little moments of pausing, of realizing, I'm not that available right now. Probably I should defer this conversation, or probably I shouldn't take it personally. And taking it personally simply means this kind of feels like a hot potato to me. And let me cool down a little bit, and then we'll see where we go with that. And those are the kinds of things that you can start to do a little bit of, even if you feel like you're kind of a beginner at this stuff.
It's a tough thing to learn, when to say things and when not to. Something, those times when you say something and as the words are coming out, you want to grab them and shove them back in your mouth.
Right, right.
You
Well,
go,
sometimes
oh,
it's a good thing to do that. I mean, one of the best moves in the world is that if you realize you made a mistake like that, to grab it back quickly. Like, don't let the other person have to ask, what did you mean by that? And what a terrible thing to say. I
yeah,
mean, right away say, oops, that was weird. Sorry. Let me try again. And, you build towards a good couples relationship by giving the other person a chance to try again. It's not about never making mistakes at all. It's about how well do you recover from your mistakes as individuals and as couples.
Well, that's an interesting thing, giving the other person the safety and freedom to not be amazing all the time,
Yes.
or be human and flawed and even nasty.
Yeah, and make a lot of mistakes.
A lot. I have
A
a
lot.
I have a thing that I say to my wife, if she's like, "Oh, you did this, the wrong thing, and you did that," and I say, "Well, I don't know if you know this, but I give myself." She does know this now. I give myself permission to make 3 mistakes a day before I beat myself up. That was one of them.
Right.
We got
Right.
2 to go. I rarely hit the 3. Rarely. It's not
That's
a lot.
very impressive,
It's not a
Bob.
lot of mistakes in a day. 3 is not. At least I don't see them.
No, not a lot at all.
So what if we did that with each other and just
Hmm.
gave permission to be challenging? Let's use that word. That's a nice, safe word. To be challenging and do things that are upsetting.
Absolutely.
I had this friend. This was a hilarious story he told me. This is basically, guys talking about their wives. So he says his wife went to the grocery store and they were unpacking the stuff, and he's, looking through the stuff, and I guess they had a list. And he says, "Oh, you forgot, let's just say tomato. You forgot the tomatoes."
Right.
And no big deal. Just, "Oh, you forgot the tomatoes." Later on, it was the next day, they were talking. She goes, "And yesterday when you tore my head off for not getting the tomatoes." And he goes, "I don't even know what you're saying. I just mentioned that you forgot them."
Right.
She took it as, and to her, I don't know her past. I don't know, some type of imperfection is considered a terrible thing. I don't know the history of it, but he was blown away that she took it that way, because it certainly wasn't the intent. I don't even know if they had a discussion about it, because he knows to keep his mouth shut when she's, and then usually, and this is true of men, usually the real reason why somebody reacted is not the thing. It's almost never the thing. It wasn't about that. It was about some other way that person is feeling. So that the way that we talk to ourselves is also a factor in how we get along with other people. And we don't know how the other person is talking to themselves.
Hmm. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
For sure. The relationship you're having with your partner is just a part of the relationship they're having with themselves and you're having with yourself.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people will say things like, that's a negative self-talk, and they'll say it out loud, and you're like shocked. You're
Hmm.
like, "You're really saying that to yourself? That's just
Hmm.
so not who you are." But maybe in the moment people feel that way. So
Right.
here's something I want to talk about, because this is, if we're talking about joy and connection, and you're in a relationship, and you have kids, what it's like to have children and the day-to-day things that go on. You have people with jobs, you have responsibilities, you have children. Those things can be incredibly wonderful, but incredibly draining at the same time. And sometimes it pulls away from the essence of what that relationship started out to be. The dailies are just there. It's a grind sometimes where I don't have anything left over, or I don't even know how to do that anymore. Sometimes I feel like let's go do something fun.
Mhm.
And you don't even know what it is after, you're doing months of the grind. That's really, how does somebody, and I'm just probably speaking for myself, somebody in a very long-term relationship make those things happen when maybe they haven't been cultivated enough
Mhm.
because of the demands of just being a human?
Yeah, there's a couple of different pieces to that that relate to kids. One is the difficulties while you're raising little kids, which are enormous for everybody. And they're enormous not because you're doing it wrong, just because they are. And then the difficulties that happen after that because you haven't had enough time together, all of which is important. And even people that aren't raising kids, the daily grind can really take over. There's the general feeling among couples therapists for a long time now, and I talk about it, John Gottman talks about it, is the importance of spending time together. That there's a certain minimal amount of time that you need to spend per week with your partner in order that's just maintenance. It's just like keeping things, in a reasonable spot. And John Gottman says 5 hours a week, and then he details what that's made up of. Well, 2 hours of the 5 hours is date night. And date night's become almost a cliche. Everybody talks about it. But there's a reason we talk about it, which is that it's really important. Like if you've got busy lives, whether it's with kids or jobs or parents or whatever, it's very important that you clear at least 2 hours every week that's just for fun, that's just for the two of you. That's not the same thing as going on a date with another couple. That's not the same thing as going for a walk, but talking about the family problems. This is 2 hours of just relaxing, having fun, whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Some people think that rekindling the romance means you have to really have a fancy date going on and special restaurant and flower. All of that actually can get in the way, especially if you're very busy, especially if you're out of the practice. So a good date is simply time that the two of you can relax together. And sometimes the simplest way forward is the best, like you go to a movie and go out for coffee afterwards, like you go for a walk. You go to your local restaurant and have a sandwich, some kind of time. And actually, you want to kind of think of it as you don't want the planning to get in the way. It's fine if you want to plan something special for a birthday or something, but too often couples get all wound around the axle around it's not special enough. And what's not special enough is having the right kind of connection with each other. And that requires regularity, maintenance, 2 hours a week of something that's fun.
Yeah. And staying off of unpleasant topics, just put them on hold for a couple hours, or
That
difficult
also.
topics.
Well, that comes back to that thing of clearing the space of negativity. Another thing that John Gottman says about that, John Gottman is a very famous couples researcher. He's one of the few people that actually researched couples relationships. So we're not talking about something related to couples. We're talking about actually observing what happens in couples relationships. And one of the things that his research showed is that couples that are doing well, generally speaking, 5 out of 6 of their interactions are positive. In other words, there's a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions. And if you start to keep track of what's going on at home, you may discover that even if you're not talking about the negative stuff, you're not mentioning the positive things. And we all have little moments of our partner did something that was helpful or nice for us. Everyday stuff like they parked your car for you because you came home late and didn't have time to put it in the driveway, or they went and got the groceries, even if they forgot the tomatoes. And too often, I've had couples tell me when I say you need to mention these things, I've had them say, well, that's just table stakes. And I have to take a deep breath there, because when it comes to close relationships and trying to get them in the right place, there's no such thing as table stakes. It's not like somebody owes you a certain number of favors or nice things just because they live with you. I mean, what a privilege that you actually get to share your life with somebody, but they don't owe you that. That's special. And so the fact that they bought the groceries, cooked dinner for you, or even parked your car in the right place because you didn't, you need to think to notice, and then you also need to think to mention it. Like, gee, thanks for parking my car. Gee, it was great that you had time to get the groceries. I really appreciate that. And I used to be very bad at this. My husband is very good at it, and I was really bad at it. And years ago, he convinced me that this was a habit I really did need to cultivate. And now I think he was totally right. So it is one of those things that you could change your habits about. And if you don't have the habit of doing this, it would be a really good habit to cultivate, and it will help your relationship a lot in little ways that aren't going to cost you that much.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I've had to work at that myself.
Mhm.
I'm more like you. So one of the sort of things is to just two ways to look at it. What if that person was your child and they did this thing for you? What
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
would you say thank you, or would you say, hey, that
Right,
was really great? You would do that
right, right. We
because
hope
they're
you would.
little and they need to have that, you know.
Right, right.
And what if it was what if it was a brand new relationship?
Yes,
Would you say
exactly.
something? So
Exactly.
that's a way to keep sort of I guess a freshness to
Mm-hmm.
what goes on. You know, one of the hard things to do is to keep a sense of playfulness in a relationship because you have so much other stuff hanging off of it over time.
A sense of humor goes a long way. In terms of opening our apertures, there's two things that work very similarly and equally well. One is genuine tears. When we see someone else cry, we often feel a heart opening. But the same thing happens when we enjoy a good laugh with somebody. Our heart opens. And it can be a very good way to build connection in a positive way that's not about solving problems. And cultivating the ability to laugh together, to play together, to be silly together is really important.
Yeah, it is, and it's an easy thing to forget when you're trying to just sort of day to day functioning.
Hmm, hmm.
Do you see couples, or
I
you?
do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. When I first opened my practice, like most people, I did a little bit of everything, but I really knew that I wanted to specialize in couples. And so more than 20 years ago, I turned the corner towards only seeing couples. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And, I wrote the book because I was really excited by what I was discovering. I had classical psychological and psychiatric training, and I had a lot of experience with meditation, yoga classes, and mindfulness. And I also had become very interested in neuroscience. And somehow these three things kind of came together. And as I worked with couples, I started to figure out, well, what is really at the bottom of everything? And what that turned out to be was whether or not they're open to each other. So I got very excited about kind of figuring out this kind of basic thing. And I wrote the book to share that more widely than I was able to do just by seeing couples clinically.
I'm sure you've had some pretty cool success stories.
I have actually. It's really fun. The best feeling in the world for a therapist, and I'm sure the therapists that are listening can relate to this. The best feeling in the world is to have somebody come back a few years later and say, "You really changed our life.
Oh,
Our
yeah.
our lives wouldn't be anything like they are right now. Thank you so much." That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to make a difference in people's lives. And when you do that, it makes you very happy. And every once in a while, I get a note like that, and it's very heartwarming. So yes, you don't always have that kind of success, but I would say if you can figure out how to never lose track of people's openness and you're working with couples, you're going to have a lot more success.
I was also thinking about, this is sort of a little bit of an offshoot because you're an MD and a psychiatrist, so you can prescribe medications.
Mhm.
How much is that? I'm guessing it's not a very big part of what you do. I just don't think it is from what you're talking about, and I may be wrong. But have you had situations where that was indicated?
Well, I want to say two things about that, and they're kind of different. One is it's not only not a big part of what I do, for a very long time, years ago, even before I specialized in couples, but certainly once I did, I developed the opinion that prescribing medications is very difficult, very intricate. It's a sub-skill in itself. It's a subspecialty. And I developed the conviction that if I was going to be prescribed one of those medications, I would want to be getting it from somebody who really knew what they were doing. And I knew that wasn't me. So early on, I decided I was not going to prescribe medications, and I started referring to other psychiatrists for that, psychiatrists that did that a lot, and I thought we're specialists in that. So that's one thing. To your other question of, is it sometimes very important? Yes, absolutely it is. And I certainly have seen people in my practice for whom going on the right medication at the right time was a life-changing difference. And it's important to know that because sometimes it's great to do therapy, and psychotherapy, what we call talk therapy, whether it's individual or couples, can help people a lot. But sometimes there's some basic physiologic imbalance, like what you have with diabetes, that simply requires a little bit of an adjustment with medication. And you need to be open to that. And if you do think it might be helpful to consult somebody who's a specialist with the other thing that I'm not so keen about is people getting those kinds of medications from their GP. GPs often prescribe antidepressants, but they're not specialists in that. And I would prefer people to go to a specialist for that. It's an art and a skill in its own right, and you're more likely to get a good result that way.
It's interesting you would say that because I had a period of time where I was, I guess it was depressed, but not like sad, really. Mm-hmm. Just it was sort of described to me once I heard the diagnosis or the possibility. It was, you know, what anhedonia is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think Woody Allen actually wrote a essay or a book about it, but it's basically, you know, what's the fucking point kind of thing.
Right.
And when I look at people that are joyful, I don't understand why they're joyful. There's nothing to be joyful. Right. So I had a period of time where I was like that. And I didn't see it. I couldn't see it. It just felt real. You know, I wasn't like mope. You know, I would just sit in a chair a lot and not do anything. Mm-hmm. And my wife said, you know, I can't be married to somebody like this. This is terrible. You know, I go, you know, and I wasn't hearing it. I did I did a workshop, you know, that was very helpful, but I came back from it and it started again. So I went to my GP and I explained the way I was feeling, and he used the word anhedonia, and he put me on the very lowest, and I got, as a GP, I started taking Lexapro, like 5 milligrams, very little. And I took it for about maybe a year, and it worked. Even that low dose worked. I started to participate more and feel joy. And then at some point I went, I don't need this anymore. And I just stopped taking it. And I haven't taken it since. It's been years now. And when I told him that I had stopped taking it, he goes, really? He goes, most people take these things for the rest of their life. And I go, well, I didn't need it for the rest of my life. I needed it for that year. And then I was able to do other things that got me into a better place. So that actually worked with the GP, but, and on the flip side,
I guess what I would add to what I said is, if you really need it and the only person you're willing to go to for it is your GP, that's a good place to start.
Better than not. Yeah.
It's for often it's really important, and you're not the only person that's had a good experience with a low dose. And it's not at all true that if you need these medications, you need them all your life. Some people do, but often there's a particular period where you just can't get a handle on things, and it kind of helps you get over the hump, and then you don't need it anymore. So all kinds of knowledge about these things, you know, is missing usually in the general population. And if you think that maybe you're in one of the categories that you might benefit, have a conversation with your GP about it.
I'm very sort of cautious about and skeptical of the whole antidepressant world and the med visits and the over medication of people. And, you know, there's a lot of money to be made doing that kind of stuff. So I would just sort of, as a caveat to what we're talking about, keep your eyes open, because, you know, what are the motivations of the people that are selling you things and the pharmaceutical industry, and do you really need it? I was trying everything before I did that. Exercise, meditation, healthy eating, a spiritual life, all that stuff. I was doing all that.
Right.
Sometimes that's enough, and it wasn't in this brief period of time, but you know, the easy fix of a pill is, to me, you know, that isn't good therapy, to have somebody like, well, you're here, just take this.
Sometimes it's an unfortunate shortcut. And I often say, before you try medication, try meditation. And that doesn't work either for everybody. And by meditation, I don't necessarily mean sitting down on a cushion, which actually is a pretty bad place to start. You need to start with something a little bit more active, like taking walks in the woods, going to a yoga class or two, and build up to the cushion. The cushion isn't the right away thing to do.
You know, I've never sat on a cushion to meditate. I lay down because It hurts my lower back, and I don't want to be distracted like that. So that's
Yes,
me.
it's not always the best. Mhm.
There's no sort of playbook, I guess, that couples can do when it's new, because it's so exciting and fun, and there aren't these issues. You don't really know what's coming down the road,
Mhm.
and there's no, I mean, what do you need to get married? Not much.
Right, right,
You
not
take the
much.
license. I think, is there a blood test anymore? I don't even know if there is that.
Right.
And that's pretty much it. I like you, you like me. Let's figure it out. And people don't talk about, well, they should, but now they don't necessarily talk about what are the goals of the marriage. What are the ways couples look at different things.
Mhm.
Are we on the same page in enough areas to make this thing work? The things that may get in the way. Also, you want to check the other person's teeth, because that's very expensive when they have to get dental work. Check your teeth, son. Check your teeth. So, folks, if we want to read this book, it sounds like an amazing thing to be able to get what I guess I'm leading into. Read the book sooner than later, because if the thing is new, you may be able to avoid a lot of issues, or at least learn how to talk about them in a way that isn't destructive.
That's what I've aimed at with the book. I have aimed to make it very accessible to people that don't really know very much about this. I started out to make a workbook because I had a lot of exercises that I did with couples that helped them not just hear from something about me, but actually experience it. And so I decided I'm going to put all those exercises in a workbook. And then as I got to work on it, I realized, no, actually, this is a book, not a workbook. But it remains quite a workbook. The book is very heavy with exercises, and they're simple. And as one reader told me recently, they're very detailed in the description of here's what you do. I don't leave people kind of dangling on their own to figure it out. There's step-by-step instructions of try this, and each of the exercises is kind of a little experiment of try this particular experiment with the way you talk to each other. One of my favorite exercises in the book, and one of my couple's favorite exercises, is an exercise about slowing down. And we always talk too fast when we talk to each other. So something very basic that you can do to make your conversations better if you find yourself in that part of the relationship where you're starting to have trouble talking to each other is slow it down by a lot. And there's an exercise in the book that helps you to do that. So I've tried to make it something, it's sort of like a do-it-yourself couples therapy. And if I've succeeded, then it should work that way. So I would say beginners should be able to find their way through this book. And with some levity, I've tried to also make it a little bit lighthearted, because being a couple, it has its funny moments also, and it has moments of recognition where there's certain things that every couple struggles with, like who doesn't have a partner that leaves their socks on the floor? Like it's just part of the road. And I think couples get a little bit of lightening when they realize that the things that feel so uniquely problematic to them actually are kind of the same thing everybody's dealing with.
Also, there are a couple of things. If you just do it the way I want you to do it, everything will be fine.
Right, right.
But the other thing is, when you talk about speaking with each other, I think a lot of times we talk at each other,
Mm-hmm.
and at a speed and volume that is makes the other person put up walls.
Mm-hmm.
But with the hope that if I do it strong enough, with enough vehemence, it's going to go in, it's going to sink in. Volume's going to make
You're
it
gonna
help.
blast through the wall, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and it's the exact opposite. But
right.
that's and then the other piece is, somebody said to me, "Are you really listening, or are you just getting ready to talk?"
Mm-hmm.
Many times, both of my wife and I have said, "You're not listening to me. You're not hearing me,"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, which is, maybe true and maybe not true. It's hard to know in the moment, but that's the feeling the other person has.
Right.
So being quiet and just letting the other person go till they're done. Well, you see it. It's interesting. You see this technique of this rapid fire talking at high volume. You see it in politics all the time now. It's even more so than ever on news shows and in hearings and all these things where people are not listening to each other. They're over talking. They're raising their voice because they feel cornered and threatened, and nothing gets done. and there isn't a willingness because there's nothing at stake in terms of the relationship between the two people. Maybe there's another thing that's at stake, but not their relationship. They already don't. These are people that don't even like each other when you see this, or are suspicious. But it would actually serve well to take some of this relationship advice, into romantic relationship advice, and put it into some other areas, because it's really smart way to deal with things. And the frustration is, I think, for people is, well, what if one side's doing it but the other side isn't? They're either not aware or they're unwilling. Those are kind of, and that can also go into relationships too.
One of the things I talk about in the book is simultaneity and non-simultaneity. Of course, if you're trying to turn things around and get going in the right direction, both of you trying at the same time is the best way to go. And often you have this asymmetry or asymmetrical trying. So one person's trying really hard, but the other person isn't. And then they get discouraged. And the other person decides, oh, maybe I should try a little harder. But now the other person's discouraged and they're not even listening. And they can go back and forth like that for a while. So simultaneity is important. On the other hand, non-simultaneity is also an important option. And what that means is you don't necessarily need to wait until the other person's ready to start to do things that may make things better and that may actually cause them to be a little more ready and a little more motivated. Like listening really well, even though both of you have been pissed off forever or for the last month, to decide on a plan of, well, the next time we get into a talk, I'm really going to listen. Listening is really, really hard. And listening well to somebody is a major contribution. And the other person may not be ready to respond. And I guess the other thing I would add to that is, if you're trying and the other person isn't ready yet, don't give up too soon. It takes a while for these things to sink in. And so sometimes people try one conversation. I listened really well, see what happened. It didn't go anywhere. That's not the way you do it. What you do is you listen really well to a month of conversations. That's the experiment. And after that, then you assess your results. If you assess your results after each moment, you're not going to see anything useful.
That's a smart way to look at it, because I know I don't learn the first time I hear something.
Absolutely. And if you've been angry at each other, you don't even quite notice that something new is happening, right? You're still, as we said earlier, you're still in your head talking your own talk to yourself. And it takes you a while to kind of look up and realize, oh, wait a second, something's not quite the way it was. Hey, she's actually listening to me. That's different. And so it takes a while for the other person to notice.
I was just thinking about the rare occasions I've met couples, and you wouldn't meet these couples in your practice, but couples that say we never fight.
Ah,
I'm like, really? That seems impossible to me.
right.
What's going on? It's like cordial all the time. No one's doing anything. I mean, are you lying to me, or are you somebody's so passive, or both people? I don't get it. Is that possible? Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. I mean, fighting is a little different than we never discuss things we disagree about.
Yeah.
So yes, there are definitely couples that say we never fight. And generally, I think a lot of time what's going on there is they don't know how to have a conversation where they disagree and have it well. So they just don't have those conversations. And a lot of times people avoid difficult conversations because they don't know what to do with them. And that's one kind of couple that never fights. Occasionally, I think there may be couples that are just so the same, and maybe so, people are different in their reactivity. My husband and I each are very fiery types of people. So the idea that a couple never fights, I mean, like, we never don't fight. But not all couples are like that. Some couples, one is very fiery and the other isn't. And then in some couples, I think maybe there's the equivalent to Peter and I, but they really, both of them are very, very sort of quiet, go along to get along kind of people. And that's just a very different kind of relationship. I happen to think that a lot gets learned, and a lot of good stuff happens when you allow more conflict in a relationship. But who's to say but what there may be couples out there for whom everything is fine and they don't need that.
I'm shocked by that, but okay.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
sound like much fun either.
It's not what Peter and I consider fun, but I get how some people might prefer it.
And the other thing, and we sort of talked about this, but when you're fighting with someone, it's not just the two people. It's like your parents or both couples, both people in the couple, their parents are in the room too.
Yeah. Yes. Everybody's getting in on the act.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? I sometimes I'm like, where did that come from?
Right. Right. Yes.
It's we get to learn, I think, the most about ourselves when we're in that type of closeness. All your buttons get pushed.
Well, exactly. That's one of the reasons that I think, to me, relationship, people say it shouldn't be this hard when their couple relationship is hard. And I'm like, why shouldn't it be this hard? The couple's relationship is a place among a few, but really a major place where we're learning about life as adults. And we're learning not only about relationships, we're learning about ourselves. If we're getting in there and having the kinds of conversations that get a little dicey, that we don't exactly know how to proceed, if we're allowing ourselves to take a few risks and have those kinds of interactions, we're learning a lot about ourselves. And if you don't do that, it's hard to learn that stuff. And it's important and helpful to know.
So if people want to find out more about you and what you do we have a website we can talk about?
I do have a website. My website is pretty easy to remember. It's KATHRYNFORDMD.com. And everything is on the website. You can find a button to click to buy the book. You can find my contact information. I always love to hear from people in email about their thoughts and ideas as I'm talking. So anybody that wants to write to me about my talk with you today, I'd love to hear from you. But there's all kinds of things on the website. So yeah, that's where you can take a look. And the website URL is in the book also. So you can also buy the book and you'll have it right there.
And let's say the full title of the book, because I know there's a little after.
The full title, the subtitle is fairly descriptive because the Aperture Effect, if we think about it, is fairly mysterious. Who knows what the Aperture Effect is? So I've tried to explain it. It's so the full title is The Aperture Effect, a radically simple approach to finding joy and connection in your relationship.
Radically simple.
Radically simple. And what that means is if you don't do anything else, don't take your eyes off the road. And eyes on the road in relationship means pay attention to your openness and the other person's openness. And if you're not completely open, make a response that slows things down and allows you to adjust. That's the radically simple idea. When couples are in difficulty, they get a little too preoccupied with figuring it out and fixing it. And they go to books and they get all kinds of models about your introversion and your extroversion, or your attachment style, or your love language. All of those models are very helpful. But like with driving a car, you need to pull over to consult the map. And while you're driving the car, while you're actually interacting with somebody, don't get too preoccupied with the models. Just keep your eye on the road. How open am I? How open is the other person? If not so open, what can we do about that?
And I love the fact that there's exercises in there too. So
yes,
you can practice.
Yeah. Lots of exercises. Hopefully it's a step-by-step to get you to where, aperture awareness is like a language. And hopefully this is a step-by-step so that you can learn this language.
Well, I really appreciate your time. This is one of my favorite topics, as I mentioned before we started, and it still is, if not more. Yeah. Thank you for all your great work. Thank you so much,
Bob, and thank you for your program. It's wonderful to be with you.
Same to you. Love talking to you, KATHRYN. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. There's also a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Dr. KATHRYN Ford for being on the program, and you can find out more at her website, KATHRYNFORDMD.com. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.